We are all haunted by the past. But what if one man was haunted by all of it? A man who was there on the road to Golgotha, cursed to witness the crucifixion, and has been walking ever since. This is the story of the wandering Jew. Not a real man, perhaps, but the most persistent and powerful ghost story in European history. A soul cursed by Christ himself to walk the earth until the second coming, carrying the weight of 2,000 years of memory. If you believe legends are reflections of a culture's soul, subscribe to Echoes from the Past. Our long walk through history begins now. Every ghost has an origin story, a moment of trauma that binds it to our world. For the phantom we are hunting, that moment is the most pivotal in Western history. The story, passed down in countless variations, begins on a dusty, sun-beaten road in Jerusalem on a Friday in the year 33 AD. A man, beaten and bloodied, drags a heavy wooden cross up the path to Golgotha. This is Jesus of Nazareth on his final journey. The procession is a spectacle of agony and mockery. According to the legend, as Jesus stumbled under the cross's immense weight, he sought a moment's rest, leaning against the cool stone of a doorway. This was the workshop of a Jewish shoemaker. Some versions of the tale call him Ahasuerus. In others, his name is lost time. Seeing the condemned man pause at his door, the shoemaker, either out of spite or impatience, scoffed. He struck Jesus and taunted him, saying, "Go on faster, Jesus. Go on faster. Why do you loiter?" In that moment, a curse was forged. Jesus, it is said, rose to his feet and looked the shoemaker in the eyes. His voice was not one of anger, but a sorrowful, divine judgment. He replied, "I shall stand and rest, but you shall go on till the last day." And with that, the shoemaker's fate was sealed. He was condemned not to hell, but to an even stranger fate. To never die, to never rest, to walk the earth as a perpetual outcast until the second coming, when Christ will return to judge the living and the dead. For over 1,000 years, this story remained a footnote, a piece of unspoken folklore. But then it surfaced. The first documented appearance of our phantom, the patient zero of this legend, appears in a medieval chronicle from England. In the year 1228, in the quiet halls of St. Albans Abbey, a group of monks gathered to hear a guest speak. He was an archbishop from Greater Armenia, visiting on a religious pilgrimage. The English chronicler, a monk named Roger of Wendover, recorded the archbishop's fantastic tale in his manuscript, the Florus Historiarum. The archbishop told the astonished monks that he knew a man in Armenia who had been present at the crucifixion and was still alive. His name, he said, was Cartaphilus. He had not been a shoemaker, but a Roman, the very doorkeeper of Pontius Pilate's court. He had struck Jesus as he was led out to be crucified. Now, centuries later, Cartaphilus lived a life of profound piety and sorrow, waiting for his salvation. He had been baptized Joseph, and he served as a living witness, a walking relic who could recount the stories of the apostles and the early saints from his own memory. With this entry, recorded by a sober monk in a respected chronicle, the ghost was given a name and a history, and from the quiet abbey of St. Albans, he began to walk into the consciousness of Europe. From that quiet monastery in St. Albans, the story of the immortal witness escaped. For the next 300 years, it was a tale told by monks and pilgrims, a piece of sacred gossip that spread slowly along the trade routes and religious highways of Christendom. But in the 16th century, the phantom stepped out of cloisters and into the public square, thanks largely to the disruptive technology of the printing press and a new wave of religious fervor. The most influential sighting, the one that gave our wanderer his most famous name, occurred in the winter of 1542. A young theology student in Hamburg, a man named Paul von Eitzen, who would later become a prominent bishop, claimed he saw a mysterious, tall man with long hair standing barefoot in the snow during a church sermon. Intrigued, von Eitzen later questioned the man, who revealed his identity. He was Ahasuerus, a Jewish shoemaker from Jerusalem, and he was a man cursed to walk for his sin against Christ. This story, published in a sensational 1602 pamphlet titled A Brief Description and Narration of a Jew Named Ahasuerus, went viral. It was the birth of a superstar fandom. Suddenly, Ahasuerus was everywhere. He was reportedly seen in France in 1604, then in Spain, in Italy. Each sighting was documented in popular pamphlets, each adding new details to the legend. But his character began to shift with the anxieties of the time. The pious, repentant Cartaphilus described by the Armenian archbishop was gone. In his place was Ahasuerus, a more sinister figure. In an age torn apart by the Reformation and racked by plagues and war, his appearance was no longer curiosity. It was an omen. He became a harbinger of doom, a specter whose arrival in a town often preceded some great disaster. The story became a virus of the mind. It was told in poems, in plays, in sermons from the pulpit. He was the subject of folk songs and woodcut illustrations sold at county fairs. He was no longer just a character in a monk's chronicle. He was a living piece of folklore, as real to the people of early modern Europe as the kings who ruled them. The ghost of the man who struck Christ was now walking the streets of their own towns, a constant, terrifying reminder of a 2,000-year-old sin. A legend does not survive for over 800 years by accident. It survives because it serves a purpose. It speaks to the deepest hopes and darkest fears of the society that tells it. And the legend of the wandering Jew was a perfect mirror for the soul of medieval and early modern Europe. Its power was twofold. First, in an age of profound but often abstract faith, the wanderer served as the ultimate living proof. For the average peasant or burgher, the stories of the gospel took place in a distant, almost mythical past. But the appearance of Ahasuerus in their own town, in their own time, made it all real. Here was a man who had seen the face of Christ with his own eyes, a man who could verify the passion, who could recount the miracles of the apostles. He was a walking, talking relic, far more powerful than the bone of a saint in a gilded box. He was a direct line to the divine past, a cure for any doubt. For the church, even if they did not officially sanction the story, the legend was a powerful, grassroots tool for reinforcing doctrine. But there is a much darker side to the legend's power. As the story evolved, especially after the 1602 pamphlet that named the wanderer Ahasuerus, it began to reflect and amplify the poison of anti-Semitism that was festering in Europe. The character ceased to be the repentant Cartaphilus and became the sullen, unrepentant Jew. His eternal punishment was no longer seen as a personal tragedy, but as a divine justification for the suffering of all Jewish people. He became a walking symbol of the collective guilt that a resentful Christendom projected onto the Jews for the death of Christ. His curse was their curse. His homelessness was their homelessness. In a time of pogroms and persecution, the story of Ahasuerus provided a terrible, supernatural excuse. It was a divine warrant for hatred. The legend became a dark mirror, and in it, Europe could see its own monstrous prejudices reflected back, disguised as the righteous judgment of God. The world that had created and sustained the wandering Jew began to die in the 18th century. With the coming of the Enlightenment, the age of reason and scientific inquiry, the shadows in which such phantoms thrived began to recede. The sightings of Ahasuerus, once a common feature of popular pamphlets, grew scarce and then stopped altogether. The rise of newspapers and a more critical public meant that a mysterious stranger in a town was no longer assumed to be a cursed mortal, but simply a man to be questioned. The phantom retreated from the streets and found a new home in the pages of literature. The great German writer Johann Wolfgang von Goethe began an epic poem about him in 1774. The English poet Percy Bysshe Shelley used him as a symbol of eternal rebellion. From the pages of Gothic novels to the verses of Romantic poets, the wanderer was transformed. He was no longer a literal specter to be feared, but a powerful literary archetype, a symbol for the great themes of the modern age, of alienation, of eternal struggle, of the unbearable burden of memory. And so, we are left with a ghost, a story. We no longer believe a man can be cursed to live for 2,000 years. But the archetype, the idea of eternal witness, is more powerful than ever. He represents the loneliness of the modern condition, the feeling of being an outsider in a world that is constantly changing. He is the ultimate symbol of history itself, a force that is condemned to keep moving forward, accumulating the memory of every triumph and every unspeakable horror, never allowed to rest or forget. Was a wandering Jew just a ghost story, born of a medieval monk's chronicle? Or is he a necessary phantom, a dark mirror we created to reflect our own evolving faith, our deepest guilt, and our unending, unbearable fascination with the past. Some ghosts are real, others are ideas. And ideas, as history has shown, can be the most powerful and persistent ghosts of all.